Hey guys, Isaac here. I just wanted really quick to put an editorial note on this video. You'll notice that we are interviewing challengers of Representative George Santos from New York's 3rd District, the Republican. You'll also notice that all 3 of the people we feature in this video are Democrats. That was not on purpose. As you can probably guess, we reached out both to the Republican challenger in this race, Kellen Curry, and to George Santos for interviews. We followed up with them several times. Kellen Curry actually had a scheduling conflict. We tried to wait as long as we could, but we couldn't wait any longer. George Santos' team just didn't respond to several inquiries to come on the show. So unfortunately, we only have the Democratic candidates to show you today. I still think it is a pretty fascinating compilation of how they are running this race, with some touching on issues that I think are relevant to everybody in every American town and city. So I hope you enjoy it. Just wanted to give a quick heads up and a note about that. Regretfully, these are all Democratic candidates. I wish we had some more Republican and conservative representation, but we did try. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. All right. Hope you enjoy the video. Leave some thoughts, feedback, and comments in the comment section, and we'll try and get back to you when we get a chance. Have a good one. Peace. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Tangle podcast, the place where we share views from across the political spectrum on the big debates of the day, and then I give you my take. Today, we are sitting down for an interview with Zak Malamed, a Long Island Democrat who is challenging Representative George Santos, the Republican from New York, for his seat in Congress in New York's 3rd District. Malamed was born and raised in Great Neck, New York, and is the co-founder of the Next 50, a Democratic donor network that has raised millions of dollars for candidates under the age of 50. He was the 4th Democrat and 6th candidate overall to throw their hat in the ring to challenge Santos, and his candidacy has drawn quite a bit of media attention. Politico, New York Post, Axios, The Daily Beast, HuffPost, among others. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Isaac, longtime fan and great to be on the program.
So listen, you're jumping into a high-profile race. I clearly already including a number of other candidates. I imagine there's going to be some theatrics. It's in New York. It's with a guy who has dominated the press coverage with his kind of, well, we'll talk about it a little more in detail. But, you know, I'm first just curious. Tell me why you decided to jump into this race, how you're planning to run in what I think is going to be a pretty unique environment for someone who's running for Congress for the first time.
Again, Isaac, thanks so much for having me. I think we need to start with the fact that George Santos is not just a local embarrassment. He's not just a statewide embarrassment. He's not just a national embarrassment. When I was in Israel and the UAE only a couple months ago, people were coming up to me asking me if I knew anything about George Santos, not knowing that he was my member of Congress. So he's an international embarrassment. And, you know, I've spent the last 4 years working to defeat extreme MAGA Republicans across America in some of the most competitive and consequential races and districts in the country. And I never imagined that we would have that form of extreme MAGA Republicanism representing me in Congress, let alone somebody who's made a mockery of my Jewish faith and the background and heritage that I share with many of my fellow residents of New York 3, having relatives who passed in the Holocaust. And so to me, when you see your home, your community, those close to you struggling, you have 2 choices. 1, you run away, or 2, you step up and help and serve. And in this instance, I've chosen to step up and help and serve, in part because when I graduated from high school, I had the exact same school board that my mother had when she graduated from high school. And for a long period of time, that continuity and leadership worked up and down the ballot. And what we realized in the wake of the pandemic in Nassau County and in Northeast Queens is that continuity and leadership was no longer working. There's a reason that people elected a fresh and unknown face in George Santos, but I promise you, they didn't want the lunacy that George Santos brought to the table. They want some normalcy. And I think that my candidacy represents a breath of fresh air, a new perspective, and a new vision for what this district can look like and what our leadership in this district can look like. And I'm excited to be in this race and looking forward to making my case.
Yeah, you raise a good point there. I guess I'm curious to start there. Why, in your opinion, did George Santos win this race? I mean, we can talk about, and we will talk about some of the controversies that have come out since he got elected, but What do you think is behind the fact that a Republican, didn't just flip the district, but won it pretty handily?
Well, I think, Isaac, what's important to note is that the red wave in Nassau County and Northeast Queens didn't start in 2022 with George Santos. It actually began in the wake of the pandemic in 2021, when a red wave took over the town of North Hempstead, where I live. In Nassau County, for what it's worth, towns are like cities, essentially. They're really large municipalities. And there was a red wave that took over North Hempstead for the first time in 30 years. Then Nassau County flipped red to blue. Nobody saw that coming. And Democrats, by the way, outspent Republicans, and still the red wave took place. And in Northeast Queens, a councilwoman, Vicky Palladino, now represents a district that Paul Vallone, most recently represented. And so we're seeing this shift in leadership across the district that's taken place. And then, it climaxed with the election of George Santos to Congress. And he didn't just win by a slim margin. He won by 8 points. Our state Senate district, we lost in the Democratic heart of the district by 8 points. And so this is not an isolated circumstance. There has been a politics of fear that consumed people in the wake of the pandemic. And, I think people right now are tired of the distraction that the extreme MAGA Republicans have brought to this district. And they want a return of real leadership, strong leadership. But they also want a breath of fresh air. And that's what I hope to bring to the table here.
But Santos got elected a year ago. It's which is kind of wild to think about. So a year ago in District 3, people are voting for him. Why? Because they're worried about crime. They're worried about the pandemic. What's behind that big 8-point victory?
Look, there are real concerns about public safety in our district. That definitely was a contributing factor. You're seeing the cost of living in our district skyrocket. You saw the elimination of the SALT deduction. You saw inflation take hold. And so people's livelihood, their security, by the way, 20 to 30% of our district is comprised of immigrants. People come to this district, like my grandmother who came as an immigrant to this district over 60 years ago. They come to this district for the promise of security and the promise of public education. And right now, public education is under threat. I was at my school board certification until 4 a.m. the day after. I announced my candidacy. We're talking also about public safety being under threat. In my district, you have a strong population of Jews and Asians, and there's skyrocketing anti-Asian hate crimes, and there's skyrocketing anti-Semitism in the district. So people don't feel that sense of security that they once felt, and the promise of public education is under threat. And right now, George Santos, they didn't vote for George Santos because of George Santos. They voted for George Santos because they were voting for something new. And for the better part of 60 years that my family has lived in this district, in this community, in Great Neck, we've been represented by Democrats for all but one term. One other time we elected a Republican to Congress, and it was in 1980 during the Reagan Revolution. And so the fact that things have changed is a sign that people are fed up. They're frustrated. They also feel scared. And we have to understand and speak to that fear, but also give them something to look forward to, some optimism, some hope. And I think new leadership is what is a part of delivering that. Again, the election of George Santos, the support that George Santos received, winning this district by 8 points, was a sign that people just wanted something new. They wanted something different. Chuck Schumer, our senator, had his worst performance on Long Island in Nassau County since his first election for the U.S. Senate. So this was not just a congressional thing. This went up and down the ballot. Unfortunately, our congressional ticket underperformed more than pretty significantly. And so we need to step up and make sure that we have a congressional ticket or a candidate that is ready to run and win and bring that breath of fresh air that people are so desperately looking for.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. You obviously have had a lot of success as a prolific fundraiser and organizer for other Democratic candidates. Quick Google search, anybody can find a lot of the candidates your organization has helped back and get into Congress. But what about your experience as someone who might be entering Congress? What do you think qualifies you to step into this arena and be a legislator, be a lawmaker, and represent your district right now?
Well, Isaac, I referenced earlier how my grandmother moved to this district as an immigrant to raise her three children because of the security, the promise of security in public education. And that promise of public education is the reason that, my mother also chose to raise her three children in the district, including myself. My mother also actually began her career as a kindergarten teacher, and I began my career in education advocacy work. I launched a national education advocacy group that helps students advocate for equity in education, and then worked on one of the largest philanthropic initiatives to rethink the American public high school, and continued that education advocacy work for one of the largest tech companies. And so, my work has transcended both the nonprofit and private sectors. I have deep experience in building an innovative economy, but also understand, how important it is to maintain the bedrock of our community that is public education. I've done the work. And what I realized in doing my work around education advocacy is that it matters who's making decisions about students, teachers, and families. Those folks impact healthcare policy, climate policy, immigration policy, gun safety policy that has a significant impact on the experience that students, teachers, and families have in the schools. And to just focus on, let's say, raising math standards or bringing a robotics curriculum into schools, all very important work, by the way, including increasing our investment in teachers. We have to recognize that there's a larger ecosystem out there that impacts the school environment on a daily basis. And I'm the only person running for this seat who's really made a deep investment in the public education system. I also understand what it's like to defeat extreme MAGA Republicans, which no other candidate running for the seat can claim to have done. And so pairing that experience in the public education advocacy arena with my experience defeating extreme MAGA Republicans, while embodying the quality of a new next generation leader myself, I think is exactly what this district is looking for right now in this moment. There's a reason, again, that the Democratic ticket of the past 2 to 3 years has been wholesale rejected across the district, from Bayside, Queens to Bayville, Nassau County. And so I'm excited to be stepping up here to represent that new vision of what's possible for the 3rd Congressional District.
I think at this point, a lot of Americans have kind of become familiar with the Santos scandals and a lot of the kind of lies that he's been caught in. It's sort of like watching reality TV. But I think there's a lot less familiarity with what he's actually done since he got to Congress. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how he's acted as a legislator and what kinds of differences and different tacks, I guess, you would take in terms of the bills you'd be supporting and the policies you'd be pursuing compared to, just what his record is in Congress.
I think what's understated, Isaac, is that a member of Congress is not just meant to function as a legislator. A member of Congress is also meant to perform the duties of constituent services. And right now, because we have George Santos in Congress representing our district, our constituents are missing out on having an active and engaged member who can help them meet their needs, whether it be getting access to passports or getting access to specific public programs that will bring funds back to their community, or heck, even having an advocate in the budget negotiations who will bring the adequate public funding back to our schools, back to our law enforcement in our community. And so right now, I think we need a member of Congress who's going to be able to deliver on the promise of constituent services and the promise of bringing federal resources back to the district. We don't have that now. And so there are a handful of folks who have really stepped up to the plate. I'll highlight first and foremost Congresswoman Grace Meng, who's our neighboring member of Congress, who shows up in the district as our de facto member of Congress, making sure that our community has access to the constituent services that they need. And there are a lot of other folks in the community who have stepped up to fulfill that need. And so as a member of Congress, I think the most important thing, aside from legislating, which we can get to in a moment, is actually being there for my community and helping them access the resources that the federal government and heck, even the state government can provide them with. And I act as a representative and a liaison between the constituents and the government in that regard when I'm elected to Congress. Look, as the legislator, there are two committees that I would hope to serve on should I be elected to Congress. One is the Education and Workforce Committee. that when Democrats take back the House will become education and labor again. I would really hope to serve on that so I can help make sure that our students are ready for the 21st century economy. You see the world changing rapidly before us. Heck, ChatGPT has just changed the way that most of us work right now. I know the people who built those products. And so I'm uniquely equipped, unlike some of the other folks who are jumping into this race, to really help shepherd our district into the new economy through the 21st century, because I have a unique understanding. I'm not going to ask, what is the Facebook? I'm not going to ask, how does Facebook make money? I'm actually going to know the people who are building those technological products that are going to shape the industries in New York's 3rd congressional district. And so whether I be working on the Education and Workforce Committee, or I serve in Foreign Affairs, making sure that we reinvigorate America's reputation abroad, those are the roles that I would hope to serve in should I be elected.
All right, Zak Malamed, I appreciate you giving us some of your time. It's going to be an interesting race to watch. I'm sure a lot of various dynamics, lots of hats in the ring. If people want to keep up with your work and follow along with your campaign, where's the best place they can do that?
ZakForCongress.com. And I'll tell you, it's ZAK, ZakForCongress.com. Join us there. Find us at Zak for Congress on Instagram or Zak Malamed on Twitter.
Thank you very much, Zak. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Isaac.
Today, we are sitting down with Will Murphy, a candidate for New York's 3rd District who is running to replace Representative George Santos. Will is a lifelong resident of the district and currently teaches in the Criminal Justice, Legal Studies, and Homeland Security Department at St. John's. Previously, he worked as a federal court litigator representing labor unions and victims of employment discrimination before starting his own solo practice, where he has represented some local businesses in New York 3 in cases against insurance companies. Will, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Isaac. I'm super happy to be here.
So look, obviously, this is, going to be a very high profile race. George Santos has garnered a lot of media attention. I'm curious if maybe we could just start with a little bit of the basics about you and your motivations. Can you tell me a bit about why you decided to run and how you're planning to navigate what I'm sure is going to be a pretty unique campaign environment?
Of course, Isaac. And it's funny, you talk about the Santos saga and myself and the other candidates that have emerged. It's almost like an episode of Game of Thrones or a whole season of Game of Thrones. But in that vein, one of these things is not like the others. And that's me. I'm not a politician. What I am is a father, a husband, a helpful neighbor, a loyal friend, an attorney, an educator, as you mentioned. And like many people across our district and frankly across the country, I've just had enough. Had enough of a broken government where elected officials go to Washington, D.C. and spend decades making themselves multimillionaires when we, the people, are left behind and forgotten. Enough of a polarized political landscape where ideologues on both sides of the aisle create tension and extremes that tear us apart and take us away from just basic, civil, respectful discourse with one another. And in looking at the Santos saga, it all became real to me. It's one thing to watch on TV when people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and some of the other bad aspiring reality stars are running our country. But it's another when it hits home in your district, the district you've lived in your whole life, the district where you have chosen with your wife to raise your family. And when that happens, you're given a choice. The choice is to sort of get over it and kind of live with the situation, or to get up off the couch and do something. And that's what we've decided to do. We've decided to get off the couch and do something and present the people of our district with a choice between sending more self-interested career politicians or aspiring career politicians to Washington, D.C., or to select one of us, an everyday ordinary person, a person who pays a mortgage in the district, a person who's chosen to actively raise their family in the district, to go and advocate for and fight for what matters to us, irrespective of party politics.
I'm curious, obviously you're teaching at St. John's. I think we're talking to you while you're in your office right now. How do you plan to manage kind of what you're talking about, this normal, ordinary life with campaigning for a very high profile congressional district that I suspect is probably going to see a lot of outside money and attention get poured into?
Well, it's certainly a challenge, Isaac. I wish I had all day long to do call time, to have donor meetings, to attend events. And it's certainly a handicap that we're needing to overcome. However, it's also a motivation, and it's a motivation that really does speak to the voters, that really does speak to the people of our community. Again, I'm a real, ordinary, everyday person. My wife and I have a 1-month-old son at home. I was up all night changing diapers, making bottles, and trying just to comfort him. I spend every morning rushing around the district with my older son, who's 3 years old, to occupational therapy appointments and physical therapy appointments before taking him to unaffordable, by any means, daycare, just so I can sit in traffic throughout the entire span of the district, from my home in Farmingdale all the way to Queens, where I work at St. John's, to do a demanding full-time job. And I do the same thing in reverse every night. And at the end of it all, my wife and I are still left out wondering each night how we're going to continue to make it work. So while, yes, it presents challenges with regards to time management, with regards to campaign events, we look at who we are, we look at who's around us, and we look at what we're fighting for, which we feel is something very bigger, very much bigger than ourselves, and something that every person in our district experiences in a daily basis. We walk in those shoes every day. We live in that world. And it's because of that that we provide the ideal choice come November 2024 for a person who's not in it for themselves, for a person who's not in it for special interest lobbyists or corporations, but who's in it for that other everyday person out there who's living the same life, the same experience, and the same struggles we are, and wondering how they're going to make it work.
I'm curious what you view as the top issues facing the district right now. I mean, what are you going to be prioritizing on the campaign trail and talking about the most to your potential constituents?
Absolutely, Isaac. So there's a number of issues that are unique to our district. Among them, of course, is the salt tax. Back in 2017, the salt tax was amended in such a way that residents of our district are no longer able on their federal tax returns to deduct the full amount of their property taxes. Now, our district happens to have some of the highest property taxes in the entire country. So needless to say, this has been very painful, whether someone's a Republican, a Democrat, or frankly, neither, in making a life in our district. In so much that what you tend to see is the old adage of grandparents leaving our district to move down south or to a different state to enjoy their retirement, while the grandkids and the kids stay behind to live their experience in our district. That has completely reversed and changed, where you see young families like my own picking up and leaving for a more affordable life elsewhere, and the grandparents are left behind. So getting that salt tax deduction restored is key, right? And of course, when you're dealing with less money in people's pockets and communities that were once very safe or once very clean, schools that were once very strong, you see those starting to slip away. You see these communities becoming a little less clean, a little less safe. You see these schools starting to slip a little bit in national rankings. And those are issues of concern for our district, too. Law enforcement is a priority. We pride ourselves on being in a campaign that, yes, stands against hate and racism, but also stands just as strongly with our brave men and women in law enforcement. In fact, we think it's through standing with law enforcement that a lot of the issues of inequity and social justice in our country will be solved in the long term. In addition to that, we need to have public schools where parents are coming together with teachers to decide what our students should be learning and how they should be learning it. We have political powers at play where it benefits career politicians and others for teachers and parents to be pitted at odds with one another in sort of a culture war. And the truth is, this is all about 3 Ps. It's about a partnership between teaching professionals and parents where they all come together to the table to talk and decide it. Politics is not one of those Ps. So keeping those crime rates down, keeping those communities safe, keeping our schools quality where parents have a say and teachers have a say, and they're doing it without the oversight of political figures, and of course, bringing down the SALT deduction. Now, I don't want to go on too long, but I think what underscores all of this, right, whether it's the SALT deduction, whether it's culture wars in public schools, whether it's law enforcement and anti-racism and anti-hate movements, is a general distrust in government. And I think this is something we are suffering from in our districts. It's very acute for us now in the wake of the George Santos saga. And I think what people need more than anything is the temperature to be brought down a little bit all of us to come back to the center, to a little bit of common sense, to a little bit of compromise, to a little bit of shared community, and effectuate policy that's not about Republican or Democrat, but about making our community as strong as it can be. And with that in mind, what we've done is we've made a pledge to serve no more than 3 terms in Congress. That's a total of 6 years if we were to continue to be reelected. This is a pledge not another one of my opponents would make, so far as I know. And we've made an additional pledge to not receive any outside income while serving in Congress. The idea is to put the service back into public service, and doing so, restore people's trust in government, get back to common sense, compromise, and community, and actually make things happen for the people in our district.
I'm curious, Santos obviously is a Republican. He won this district not very long ago running as a Republican. You've made the choice to run as a Democrat, somebody with no political background. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that decision, why you chose to run as a Democrat, and what elements of the Democratic Party you feel like are kind of representing your values in this race right now.
Absolutely. It was a choice to make, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a choice. I've been a registered Democrat since 18 years old, but I think what's getting caught up when you think of DC Democrats, and even very close to home, Manhattan Democrats, next to our district, is people kind of forget what a purple or Long Island, Queens Democrat really is. We're not blue, we're purple, right? As I mentioned, we stand against hate and racism, but we also stand with law enforcement. We live and let live with respect to people's personal lives, but we are not woke. We are not woke. We're not forcing our values on others. We believe in keeping what's ours and, in fact, in fighting to keep what's ours. But at the same time, we do believe in a fair chance for everybody with a little hard work and drive to improve the quality of their life and their family's life. And that's where we stand, in the middle. So if I were to distance myself a little bit from a DC or Manhattan Democrat that tends to populate on the extreme liberal wings of our party and progressive wings of our party, the media attention, there's a whole army of us right here in the middle who are wanting someone, a candidate, a cause, a campaign, a movement to speak for us. And that's what we're hoping to offer. And the truth is, this is a movement that speaks not only to a traditional old school Democrat, but also to the overwhelming majority of unaffiliated voters in our district. In our district, you have Republican voters, you have more Democratic voters, but trumping all of them by more than double is our section of unaffiliated voters. And it's about bringing everyone together into the table, which I hate to use this term because for some people it might be triggering, back to normal. Back to normal. And you know what? I admit readily that's a trigger term, but I think we can all agree the way our government is functioning now, it can use a little bit of triggering.
All right, Will Murphy, I appreciate you giving us some of your time. I'll let you get back to the classroom. Before you go, if people want to check out your campaign or support your work, where's the best place to do that?
Absolutely, Isaac. Thank you. You could visit willmurphyforcongress.com. You'll learn all about where we stand on the issues, a lot about myself and my family, as well as the opportunity to contribute. Again, I am a parent of 2 small children and have a demanding full-time job. I don't have the time for donor meetings. So if you'd like to contribute, please do. You can also see us on Instagram and on Facebook. The links are included on our website, willmurphyforcongress.com. And thank you again, Isaac, for the time, for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Will. I appreciate it. Today, we are sitting down with Josh Lafazan. Josh is currently serving his 3rd term in the Nassau County legislature, representing the 18th legislative district, having been elected at age 23 in 2017, the youngest ever legislator on Nassau County. In addition to his role there, he works for Northwell Health in the company's corporate social responsibility division. He's also on sabbatical currently from teaching courses at Long Island University. Josh, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So you're here today because you are running in Representative George Santos's district, obviously a high-profile congressional district. I'm wondering if you could just tell me why you decided to run in the district. What brought you into this race?
Sure. It's twofold. Of course, first is George Santos has made a national nightmare, a reality for everyday Long Islanders and residents of Queens living in New York's third. So the fact that the biggest fraud in the history of American politics is our member of Congress is reason enough to run. But I'm running because I've served my community for my entire life. I got elected to the School Board of Education at 18 as a high school senior, taking on an overpaid superintendent. Got elected at 23 to the Nassau County legislature because our county executive got indicted and I wanted to take on local corruption. I'm running for Congress because Washington is broken, and it's not news to any one of your listeners, but we need to send a new type of elected official, a new type of leader with a new vision, with a proven record of working across the aisle and getting things done to make a difference and deliver impact. So I'm running to deliver results for Long Island and Queens, and I'm in this race to win.
I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what you view as the most pertinent issues in New York's third district right now. What's at the top of the list for you?
Affordability is always number one. It's too expensive to live on Long Island and Queens. Taxes are too high. Inflation has hurt middle-class families. So how do we bring costs down? How do we bring taxes down? Of course, we need to make sure that the SALT deduction is fully restored. But more than that, how do we make sure that we can deliver, property tax relief for Long Islanders? How can we bring costs down across the board to deliver relief at the gas pump and at the grocery store? Moreover, crime and public safety continues to be at the forefront of residents' minds. How can we make sure that we're giving law enforcement more funding? How can we make sure we're investing in new tools like license plate readers and cameras? How can we make sure that our residents are safe and feel safe? And there's a million answers that could be number three. Of course, we care about the environment, protecting the Long Island Sound, protecting our drinking water, and protecting our clean air. Of course, we care about healthcare, keeping healthcare affordable, expanding access so everyone can go to the doctor when they get sick and everyone can have access to prescription drugs that are affordable. So the list goes on and on. But I will say that we need a member of Congress who's busy passing bills, not one who couldn't pass a lie detector test.
I'm curious, George Santos won this election running as a Republican. You're running as a Democrat. He won the race actually pretty handedly, which is wild to think about looking back. How, as a Democrat, are you going to win over the votes of some of these Republicans who clearly, came out and supported Santos? And how are you going to speak to people who maybe were Santos voters in the last election?
Sure. So my answer is electability is everything in this primary, right? We need a Democrat who can win and deliver Hakeem Jeffries a majority in the House. We need a Democrat who can win in those tough to win areas and tough to win years. And that's me. I'm a Democratic lawmaker who represents a Trump district in the legislature. And I've won it 3 times because we are not afraid to work across the aisle and get things done to deliver results. We're not afraid to stand up for issues that we believe in. We're not afraid to knock every door, Democrat, Republican, Independent. And if you look at the district in the North Shore of the district where Democrats lost, that's a district where I win. And so having a candidate with crossover appeal is going to mean everything to win what will be one of, if not the most competitive districts in the country.
I've talked to a few of the other candidates in this race. Obviously, Will Murphy and I think Zak Malamed are probably the other 2 top contenders with D's next to their name. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what kind of distinguishes you from them and why you feel like you're a better candidate for voters in the district.
Sure. So I've served in elected office for 11 years. And of those 11 years, I make a habit of focusing on me, focusing on my campaign, not talking about my opponents, right? Democracy is beautiful. Anyone who wants to run can run. My campaign and what makes us unique compared to anybody, not just those individuals. We're the only elected official in the race. I'm a proven vote getter in terms of being a Democrat who can win in a Trump district and a Republican district. We have the resources in terms of our fundraising. We've raised over $400,000. We have an incredible organization assembled. We're ready to win not just a primary, but we're ready to win a general. So what differentiates me from anybody, quite frankly, in the New York's 3rd congressional district is I can win this seat in November and deliver the Democrats a majority in the House.
The Santos scandal, the stuff about his lies, the stuff about his resume has sucked up so much oxygen. I think there hasn't been enough talk about what he's actually done in Congress from a legislative perspective. I'm curious if maybe you could talk a little bit about his voting record or what kind of issues you're seeing him put his weight behind right now and whether you think, they're worthwhile or not, how you view that part of his candidacy. If we can take the scandal stuff out of it for a minute, just the actual governing part of it. How are you viewing how he's doing so far as a representative of the 3rd District?
Sure. Scandal or no scandal, George Santos is the most useless member of the House of Representatives, right? We have a member of Congress who is a pariah in Washington, who is, quite frankly, cozying up to the far right of the far right because nobody in the mainstream will work with him. And if you look at what he's done, he's been a disgrace, right? Having our member of Congress co-sponsor a bill naming the AR-15 the national gun in the country at a time when activists on Long Island are working for common sense gun legislation, at a time when he doesn't seem to be focusing on any of the issues locally. He's delivered $0 in funding for our fire departments, our school districts, our water districts. He's done nothing for this district. Having him in Congress hurts everyday Long Islanders and residents of Queens, right? Our member of Congress for 2 decades delivered funding for our schools to keep our taxes lower. Our member of Congress delivered funding to protect the Long Island Sound and protect our environment. George Santos delivers nothing but insults. He's a disgrace to not only the House of Representatives, he's a disgrace to this district. And so based on his record, he needs to be fired. Based on the scandal, he needs to be in jail.
I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about, to me, one of the elements that'll play a key role in this race, which is crime issues in Long Island and also in New York more broadly. There's obviously a great deal of variance in how House representatives from the state of New York and more specifically the city of New York talk about crime. I'm wondering if you could share your view on what you think would be good for members of your district when it comes to things like crime and policing right now.
Sure. So I'm a lawmaker with tens of thousands of residents in my district. I will tell you that one of, if not the most number of calls we get to my office is about public safety and crime. There's a perception that people are not safe. There's a fear of people taking public transit into the city. There's worries about catalytic converters being stolen, homes broken into. First and foremost, as a Democrat, and as Democrats, we have to acknowledge that people have a right to feel concerned, that crime is rising, and that people want to feel safe and be safe in their homes and communities. If people don't have public safety, nothing else matters. And so as a Democrat, I talk about the need, first of all, to stand up to those who would defund the police and say, absolutely not. But more than that, we have to talk about increasing funding to law enforcement, giving them the tools they need to keep us safe, investing in, like I've done in my district, license plate readers to make sure we're apprehending individuals who are stealing catalytic converters. Making sure we have new cameras and technologies to be able to better apprehend suspects, making sure that we are investing in tools and intelligence-led policing like we're doing here in Nassau County. And so as a Democrat, I'm unafraid to speak about crime. And as Democrats, we can't be afraid to speak about it. In fact, we have to speak about it more, and we have to be better on the issue.
Before I let you go really quick, I'm just curious, one of the things I've noticed is that across your campaign website, campaign literature, when I see you get interviewed, one of the things I've noticed that you've made the heroin and the opioid epidemic a big issue, a big part of your campaign. I think that is something I think has been different from the other candidates I've seen in this race. I'm wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about why that is, what you're seeing on the ground that has made you feel that way.
Sure. So, focusing on substance abuse has been at the forefront of my legislative priority from the moment I got into the legislature. One of the first bills I passed was Timothy's Law, named after Timothy Kroll, who was a young man who lost his life to heroin addiction. And we passed a bill to expand resources in Nassau County. For the first time ever, have an app on your phone where you plug in your zip code. We give you directions to the nearest treatment center. We have a 24-hour hotline. We're investing in treatment because treatment works. What we're seeing on Long Island and in the city is we are at the forefront, not only in terms of overdoses, but in terms of the fentanyl crisis, in terms of Narcan saves. And so we have to do better as a government to get tools into the hands of individual residents, training every citizen in Narcan, making sure we're investing in prevention. But we also have to work on treatment, making sure treatment on demand happens. So anyone who needs help gets the help they need. And so on and so forth. So it's something that I focused on in the legislature. It's something I can have a far greater impact in the United States Congress.
All right, Josh Lafazan, if people want to keep up with your work or follow along with the campaign, where's the best place for them to do that?
We're everywhere. JoshLafazan.com or follow us Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, Josh, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. Best of luck in the race, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks so much.